Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. Always a pleasure and a privilege when we can get together for these updates. And I'm thankful for all of you who have been sharing and making sure that the link gets out there because it's a real challenge. We have found that it is difficult to break through some of these bans and some of these limits and some of these things, but thankfully you guys are making the difference, so really appreciate that. And it's always a pleasure for me to read your comments and thoughts, especially on some of these stories that we cover. um, you all have gifts and discernment, and it's very greatly appreciated that we can collaborate and look at some of these things. And we started doing these weekly news updates several years ago, so that we could take a look at the news headlines from a scriptural perspective. We like to say we're looking at it from the 10,000-foot view, right? And like to continue to maintain a good perspective. If you do these too often, if you're getting updates every hour, that's going to create a lot of anxiety. And so we like to say we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. Amen and amen. And for those of you, again, joining us for perhaps the first time, we do have a website called remnantwatch.com. We update that, and you'll always find the banner here at the top takes you to the latest update, and always does that every week. And we do have a search bar here for any of the older stories that you may be wanting to go back and take a look at. And we do these in chronological order. So you'll have to go back if you want to look at older stories or older broadcasts to find headlines and find some of that. But really good for us to have a simple index so that we can keep track of things, again, from the 10,000-foot view. You'll notice there's no advertising. We're not selling you anything on this site. That's very important to us. It's a labor of love from the members of Remnant House. So thank you, members, who make this broadcast possible. And with that, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story, Elon Musk is warning of a U.S. bankruptcy. And you may not think much of that, considering it's coming from someone you might not consider to be too authoritative, but you may not know that he has been put in charge, or is going to be involved in the Department of Government Efficiency. And so the tech billionaire is set to lead a new agency called Tasked with Tackling Budget Inefficiency. So now, with that understanding, him making a statement concerning the, unsoundness of the federal government is actually a big deal. The U.S. is at risk of bankruptcy unless major and immediate action is taken. Now, this right here is the word you need to look for, because the word major means everything's on the table. That's why we're looking at those of you that heard about this already, an external revenue service instead of an internal revenue service that has already been announced by the president. And so action is being taken to address the government spending and mounting federal debt, Elon Musk has warned. The SpaceX CEO and owner of X is slated to co-lead the upcoming Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which many of you may recognize that from the Doge coin, an agency tasked with reducing unnecessary federal expenditures once President-elect Donald Trump assumes office, which, of course, happened today. So we have to be aware of what's slated, because if they're saying words like major, then they usually mean major. Okay, they usually mean it's going to be a big deal. And as a matter of fact, those of you that aren't hiding under a rock and know that today Donald Trump was sworn in as the 47th president of the United States, and he is already on the move. He already issued pardons for the January 6th rioters, and he signed more executive orders. It was rumored that he would be signing upwards to 200 executive orders today. So that is got to be a record, folks. Donald Trump has been sworn in. His first round of executive orders at his rally at the Capital One Arena, including withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty and requiring that federal workers return to work in person full time. Woohoo! So no more remote working for federal workers. You've got to show up And that requires that if they need to have a conversation with you, you'll be at your desk. And so he's continuing his activity, and he revoked some protections there that were set in place by Biden. And many of you know that we are undergoing a massive change in the country right now in terms of even just policies, and it is happening very, very quickly. So, what was enforced yesterday may not even be even looked at today. So we are we are in a massive, massive moment of flux, which is kind of interesting, really, when you think about it, because it's like, so what's the rules? So what's okay, what's not? And Trump was flouting the absence of crypto regulation, and there is none, uh, by his new meme coin that came out made him a billionaire again. So it's almost like he's making fun of the holes, the gigantic gaping holes that are in the current system. And speaking of gaping holes, one of the big problems that they have, and one of the big major changes that need to be made, is the economic changes. And this, friends, is literally the top of the ticket tonight, because this is where the war really is manifesting. I mean, everything else, the bullets, the guns, the missiles, the this, the that, all of that gets them to the table to talk about who's going to rule what, and who's going to get paid for what, and whose money are we going to use. That's what this is really all about. Remember that the love of mammon is the root of all the evil that you see, right? So be really careful out there. And sure enough, okay, so in order for them to pull off their new moves, the things they need to do, there's one player that they have to get on board because of the amount of debt, the amount of US debt that they're carrying. And that, my friends, is the Chinese. So, as much as they try to alienate them in the previous administration, none of that worked. And already evidence is indicating that there's going to be some major changes. And I believe many of these may be very positive, folks. Remember, if you suddenly find yourself with the Jubilee, don't you dare thank a politician. Don't you dare. Okay. So Trump is holding very good call with China Z, because he needs him to be on board. You need to understand this. He needs China on board with what they're about to do in order to pull this thing off. Okay. They can't do it without China. So all this, anti-China stuff is nonsense. They were trying to get them to fight. They don't want to fight. And the incoming U.S. president, his Chinese counterpart, have not spoken since 2021. And he says, I just spoke to Chairman Xi Jinping of China. Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform on Friday, adding that the call was very good, a good one for both China and the USA. And it's my expectation that we will solve many problems together. So here's the issue. China's got some serious, serious problems, guys, really big, bigger than you may have been led to believe. So they're covering this up because they were trying to move everything to China, right? So they wanted China to look like they were fabulous and doing great. It's just not true. So starting immediately, we'll discuss trade, fentanyl, TikTok, and many other subjects, Trump continued. And President Xi and I will do everything possible to make the world more peaceful and safe. You can't go to war with words like this. Okay. But the thing is that, remember, we were told to watch out for words like this, that there would be one who would come in peaceably. So this is very dangerous, what we're watching here. All right. And of course, Chinese state media is confirming the call had taken place, but provided no further details. They're not going to characterize the call as being positive or anything like that. It's just not how the Chinese operate. But the American president wanted you to know that he feels like he's making progress. Well, he needs to make progress, because the alternative is war. And I don't believe either side benefits from that. Thankfully, perhaps cooler heads will prevail, and we'll finally beat some swords into plowshares. So that'd be a good thing. Amen. And there are certain signs that are ominous. So it's not just the United States with its new president and some of its new policies that are threatening stability. It's also some of China's activities. And of course, they built their Navy up pretty big and pretty quickly. New China picks are making experts sweat. And they are building and have built quite a bit. It's been long considered a final red flag for Beijing's intentions to invade Taiwan. And so now satellite photos have revealed the construction of a new fleet of D-Day style landing barges. And we talked a little bit about this last week, to surge troops and take over a beach. So it's not a good sign. We're going to hope this is a negotiation tactic. Right, for the people, for the innocent people, for the children, for the these geopolitical nonsenses. People die and then they go to the table. Why don't we just skip the people dying part and go sit at the table, right? So that's the reality. And the reason why I say this, folks, is because when you start cross-checking some of this information, you start realizing a lot of the stuff that you're seeing is nonsense and paper tigers. For example, China has been presenting itself as economically sound when in fact it's experiencing some serious economic difficulty. In fact, China is experiencing a complete financial crash right at the moment. China's 10-year government bonds are yielding just 1.65%, and their policy overnight rate sits at 1.5, and their real estate collapse continues. And so this is not looking good for them. Their numbers are declining quickly, so they need a deal too. So that is good news. We like that. Yes, it is a bit of a Cyrus situation. It's a bit of a Nebuchadnezzar situation, actually. And we just heard that in our last week's scripture reading, where, the Most High rewards Nebuchadnezzar with Egypt because he couldn't get anything out of Tyre and Sidon, but he did do service to the Most High by destroying Tyre and Sidon. 13 years he spent destroying Tyre and Sidon. And so the Most High went ahead and gave him Egypt for his wages. So who knows? Yahuwah, the Most High, uses natural powers to accomplish his will, has been doing it for 6,000 years. So we shouldn't be surprised as certain things are coming in and really challenging existing powers. So one of the existing powers that have been dominating the world scene has been the central bank. I think everybody, I don't care who you are, I don't care if you are on the opposite sides of the political, religious, economic, and ethnic spectrums. I don't care we all know who the bad guy in that room is, right? We all know that this is the biggest challenge we all face. And frankly, an enormous giant, if you will, when you think of it from the standpoint of its power, the central banking system that we all grew up with, that essentially dictated to every country terms, conditions, opportunities, non-opportunities, good, bad, up, down, essentially declaring they control economies, which means they're responsible for poverty. Selah. If they can control economies, they're responsible for poverty. Selah. You can't have it both ways, right? So even that power has been severely weakened, such to now where they're begging for help because these central banks no longer have the authority they once did. And why is that? Because there's an equity on the world scene that is not a debt-based instrument. And that has finally caused the repercussions we all, I think, hoped in its initial debut it would do. And it's finally having the impact. So Trump is to designate cryptocurrency as a national priority, according to a recent report that's put out by Yahoo Finance. As President Donald Trump begins his second term, he plans to issue an executive order making cryptocurrency a national priority. So for those that thought it's going away, I don't think you make a national priority out of something going away. So whoever told you that was misinformed and their discernment was off. The order is meant to guide government agencies to work within the industry and possibly pause crypto-related litigation, according to Bloomberg, which cited unnamed people familiar with the matter. Now, what crypto-related litigation might be very impactful to the industry? Well, I don't know. There's this whole appeal going on with XRP. XRP, of course, is the actual coin. BTC was the beta test coin. XRP was made just months later. Most people don't know that. They think XRP is a relatively new thing. It is not. But it has to be done correctly. It's a very dangerous area, folks, because ignorance is the devil's playground. The devil loves your ignorance. So this is one of the reasons why we needed brethren to go into that space and start to set things up in that space to protect all of us, because otherwise we can be easy victims, and we can't run away from it. It's like running away from the internet. Remember when the internet first came out, folks? A lot of people ran away from it, like, oh no, it's, it's not going to, it's of evil and what have you. Certainly could be. And if you run away from it and let the devil take it over, it will be. But how many know that the saints came roaring back and said, wait a minute, now we get it. Now we understand. We can use this to preach the gospel. We can use this to awaken people. We can use this to share information. We can use this to connect and to unite. And all of a sudden, we turned it around. Well, I think the same is true with some of these new technologies that are coming in, folks. Don't be afraid, be strong and very courageous. Speaking of courageous, it does take courage to come to peace. It's much easier to have war than it is to have peace, folks. It is something that we have to keep our minds on all the time and keep praying for shalom in the world. Israel and Hamas did reach a Gaza ceasefire agreement, and we're very happy to hear that. This is a breaking story that just happened last week, and many of you may have heard about it. Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement in a multi-phase ceasefire that commits them to end the war in Gaza. President Biden and Qatar's prime minister announced separately on Wednesday. And of course, former President Biden wanted desperately to take credit for that. But we all know full well exactly why they have peace right now, because the incoming president said all hell will break loose if Israel and Hamas ceasefire deal collapses. So he let them know, not only last week, remember we reported that if those hostages are still there, they'll be held to pay, right? And that was very Reagan-esque, right? Very Reagan-esque. So it was getting inaugurated indoors, by the way. Reagan was also inaugurated indoors for his second term. So very Reagan-esque. And incoming President Donald Trump warned all hell will break loose if the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, slated to go into effect Sunday morning, would collapse. And less than 48 hours before his return to the White House, Trump was asked whether he believed the hostages would be freed by the terror group under the three-stage accord, and to sign off on early this week, with the first captive scheduled to release Sunday afternoon. And he said, we're going to see very soon. It better hold. So he was very clear, and that is leadership, folks. People may not like him. They may not like the fact that he held his line. They may not like the fact that he holds his ground, but that's a leader, folks. And you have to be willing to make enemies in order to make shalom, to make peace, because some people are bent on war. They really are. They're warmongers, the scripture calls them. And you have to put that down. You have to stop it. And that's what peacemaking is all about. And so we definitely see some peacemaking going on. And it's again, forcing parties to sit down, forcing parties to stop warring, forcing parties to communicate one with another. That's peacemaking, folks. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. And as a matter of fact, Israel and Hamas ceasefire, the Israeli government went ahead and approved the deal. So again, under a little pressure, but they went ahead and did it. And, it's hard for them to argue with Donald coming in. They got to have a 4-year relationship with him. So this was a good moment to push hard. And so they agreed to a ceasefire deal. I'm very happy to see that. We're happy to see whenever kids are not getting hurt, right, guys? We're happy to see when people just sit down and talk about their problems as opposed to shooting at each other. So there's that. Israeli government approved the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal overnight on Friday. After more than 6 hours of deliberation, the government has approved the framework for the return of the hostages. So this is good news. And we're very thankful for that. We don't take sides in these things, nor do we point fingers. I think there are some pretty bad actors on both sides. When we agree, guys, can we agree that there's bad actors on both sides? And you might say it's a little lopsided depending upon what you're looking at. And I can give you that. But nevertheless, there's bad actors on both sides, and we definitely need cooler heads to prevail. So this is a very good thing. In my heart, I believe it's a good thing to slow this down, stop killing people, stop killing children. I just saw a report that a bomb fell just before the ceasefire was about to take place, and a bomb fell and it killed like a mother and her child. I mean, like, why? I mean, just a few minutes later or a little while later, it's going to be a ceasefire. So they got that last bomb in, just had to get that last one in there, you'll never be able to explain to me the value of this. I'm sorry, no one will ever be able to validate this to me. As a veteran, even, you just will not be able to. I can understand when you're standing up against an army or an invasion or some type of military action, but when innocent civilians are being destroyed in this process, folks, somebody's got to stop that. And so we're really glad to see that that's happening. On the more domestic front, we are seeing big change, and it's happening right away, folks. Where some people were expecting some economic change today, I certainly was expecting to see big market movement, and then I realized, hey, wait a minute, banks are closed today. It just didn't even hit me. So tomorrow we'll probably be seeing the impact some of these executive orders and some of the things are going forward. So stand by for some market movement and some changes upcoming. And speaking of changes, look at this, folks. And this is going to affect the economy as well, because this is going to be removing workers, right? So now ICE is planning to ramp up arrests in major U.S. cities after Trump takes office, sources are saying. And so the incoming Trump administration is planning to ramp up operations to arrest unauthorized immigrants across the U.S. Next week. And so all throughout this week, and they're targeting sanctuary jurisdictions that limit cooperation with federal immigration officials, two sources with the plans tell CBS News. And so the locations expected to be targeted by deportation teams from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement include those with large populations of immigrants, such as the Chicago area, one of the sources said. So I do believe that there was a lot of pushback as this came out, and it may in fact be that they're going to back this up a little bit. And I'm not sure, folks. I think that it's just a little more bluffery, and they're playing head games with their target. They're coming for them. So if you're an immigrant that you did not come into the country legally, you might want to start making plans to get out before they make you leave, because I promise it won't be pleasant if they force it. The momentum is to their back, and it's going to be an unpleasant experience for you. So if you hear you've overstayed your visa, might be a good time to start heading back to the exit now. just so you know, because it's not looking good for you. It's not looking good at all. It's not looking good. The FBI is starting to sound alarms over the AT&T hackers. We've been hearing a lot more about hackers, folks. And so this is one of those things that we have to be on the, kind of keep our eyes open for, because this presents security breaches for you, for me, for all of us. And hackers who breached the AT&T system may have handed criminals a roadmap to FBI informants. So this thing is really coming apart. This agency here is, the credibility is just is dropping so quickly, it's not even funny. Hackers who breach AT&T systems may have handed criminals a roadmap to FBI informants, stealing call logs. I mean, that is horrible to hear. That could unravel investigation and jeopardize lives, you think? According to alarming new details revealed just this past Thursday. FBI officials have warned that last year's AT&T system breach likely led to the theft of months' worth of calls and text records tied to federal agents. So there you have it, folks. That's now, in the wind, and it's beyond cybersecurity. Remember Vault 7, guys? Remember that? WikiLeaks released Vault 7, the hacking tools of the CIA, I believe, or one of those groups, or NSA, or one. I don't remember which one they were, but they basically gave open game. I mean, it was like anybody can use those tools and hack into anything. So it is open game, and we have entered into a new world, a new era. In fact, the UN chief just said something that was really just puzzling, but there it is. He just said the United Nations Security General Antonio Guterres warned on Wednesday that humanity has unleashed Pandora's box of ills, including out-of-control technology that risks upending our very existence. And because of the various things that are happening right now that are beyond control, again, some of them being pushed by artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot of concern about the technology being secure. And frankly, I've been laughing about this for a while because I know darn well it's not. Um, and there's no way to make it so. So everything we're doing right now is all temporary. Everything is a stopgap measure, even using various currency initiatives and various things in the interim. They're all temporary, folks. Eventually, this thing completely collapses, right? So the best that we can do is sort of prolong the inevitable a little bit. That's about it. And make sure that we convert what we can to actual things that we can use, because after all, you can't eat money, you can't eat silver, you can't eat gold. And boy, oh boy, only when the last fish has been pulled out of the river will these people figure out they can't eat these things, right? So, this is why it's important for us to be wise in this hour, sober and vigilant, wise as serpents, harmless as doves. And one of the things that we were talking about last week, do you remember this? We talked about these toxic fumes, and we were talking about both on the East Coast and the West Coast. So, on top of the fires, we also had um, one of the battery plants go up. Okay, one of the lithium ion battery plants go up. Remember that, guys? So, what's that going to do to the air quality? And remember the direction the wind blows, right? So, the wind generally comes from the west. So, from California, and starts coming across the country. And so, if there's toxic fumes there, well, that could affect a lot of people. Well, look here, where there's smoke, there's fire. Or I'm sorry, where there's fire, there's smoke. Los Angeles blazes raise fears of super toxic, which we absolutely knew is the case. There's no way around it, guys. There's no way. These fumes are not mega toxic, especially considering wink, wink, how we know these wink, wink fires were wink, wink started wink, wink, right? So imagine just like what kind of fumes come from that type of fire ignition. Then on top of that, you add in like all the burnt materials and plastics and toxic things that are being burnt. And it's concerns that dangerous fine particle pollution can become embedded in bloodstreams and lungs. You think? One might think that might have been the plan. Los Angeles wildfires have claimed the lives of at least 24 people and have burned well over 12,000 structures. But if you think this is the end of it, you're wrong. One of the ways that they do this, and we consistently watch, is they like plausible deniability. So they do something happens, and then months later, people are affected by it, but not right then. And so these wildfires are smoke is a fine particular type of pollution. So when it gets into your system, it doesn't get out. Okay, this is what's so damaging about this. So one gulp of air is all it takes for it to fill your lungs with these fine particulates. So if you're running, right, and you just happen to get one lungful, just one, that's it. Your lungs got it in your system now. So this is what's so dangerous about this stuff. This is why he told us, come out of her, my people, for this very reason. And unfortunately, a lot of folks are now, their health is at serious risk. We don't know what the implications. We're going to have to keep an eye on this, aren't we, guys? In 6 months, a year from now, if we start seeing mass die-offs, if we start seeing on East Coast and West, because remember the fog's on the other side, right, guys? So if we start seeing mass die-offs and mass numbers of people just gone, we're not going to have to look too far. So this one is highly dangerous. And yeah, somebody mentioned cancer killing. The firefighters are now being exposed. And of course, their equipment is designed for certain things. It does help, but these are superheated fires. It's extremely dangerous. And again, remember, you don't need 100 lungs full. You need one. You need one, and that's it. Okay, you just drowned your lungs in all that chemical. So, and these are chemists, man. They've been doing this for hundreds of years. Okay, a long time. So, here we go, folks. And the earth continues to rumble. So we keep seeing this. Again, this was another earthquake, a 6.6 earthquake that shook Japan and prompted a tsunami warning. So we did see that. That was just recently. And of course, Japan's meteorological agency said the tsunami waves have already reached the country's southwest course, an estimated of 3.2 feet. But there was a lot of concern about this, and it rattled southwest Japan. Of course, this was earlier last week, but nevertheless, we're seeing a lot more earthquake activity ratcheting up, even in areas that don't normally get earthquake activity, like Richmond. So this is very unusual to see this. And this was Richmond, Virginia. Multiple neighborhoods in Richmond are reporting they felt a shake on Tuesday evening. As it turns out, it was a 2.8 magnitude earthquake in a place that they don't get earthquakes, folks. So when Messiah warned that we would see earthquakes in diverse places, that's what he meant. That's what he meant. So we're seeing them in places that we would otherwise see. And some of you are going, is it natural? Or are there things going on underground? Good question. Really good question. Think Schneider, right? Is there a possibility that we've got underground warfare? Is there a possibility there's underground conflict? Is that producing some of these things? We don't know, but it's a great question. And I've seen some people ask it, and I think it's an intelligent question to ask, because some of these earthquakes are shallow. They could be caused by explosions. They could be caused by detonations. They could be caused by other things than just natural causes, especially when they're happening in places there aren't normally earthquakes. So definitely a great question. I'd love your thoughts, by the way, in the comment. Yeah, some of you are saying the same thing, like, could be other reasons for those earthquakes. And maybe that's why Messiah said that, because he knew these earthquakes you're going to see in the last days, they're not even going to be normal earthquakes. They're going to be in diverse places. And why? Because there's going to be underground warfare, and he didn't tell us that part, but he told us about the earthquakes, right? So we need to decipher some of this, that obviously this war that is going on right now. And speaking of war, how many felt like the enemy was the cold? How many felt like the cold was like coming for you? Oh man, that cold is no joke. We don't normally get real cold down here in Arizona, but we got some cold down here. Okay, we got cold down here, and it was no fun. Life-threatening cold weather to expand southward across the nation, impacting 235 million people. The coldest air so far this winter will grip the central and eastern United States much of this week, plunging temperatures below zero for an extended period of time for some cities. So, folks, it's going to be bitter. The relentless and bitterly cold air is on track to return in earnest across a wide swath of the nation this week. Residents from the northern plains to even the Gulf Coast will have noticeably cooler conditions throughout midweek, with some forecasts to experience downright dangerous temperatures, folks. So please, please be safe. I'm hearing about expectations of snowfall along the Gold Coast. This is crazy. We're really, really seeing some odd weather anomalies, and you got to kind of wonder if there's some intention to that. Maybe cold weather keeps people from doing crazy things. Who knows? That could be. I don't know. Some people have suggested that maybe cold weather keeps people home. I don't know. I don't know if that's manufactured or not, but I'll tell you what, that cold is real. So stay warm out there, folks. Stay warm. And how many have heard about the TikTok ban? So, people sitting at home doing nothing, they got to have something to do. They're going to watch TikTok, right? It's just crazy. Well, Biden's not going to enforce the TikTok ban, and so he left the fate of the app to Trump. And I do believe that was a coordinated effort, because, again, it becomes a bargaining piece with China. Remember, he has to make a deal with China. So, again, it becomes something that they can do. President Joe Biden won't enforce a ban on the social media app TikTok. That's set to take effect a day before he leaves office on Monday. And instead of, he's leaving it up to President Trump to deal with. President Trump already said that he would extend the deadline, if you will, by 90 days. And I think, again, what is this being used for? Well, probably a bit of negotiating with China and trying to get an arrangement that allows us to go forward in a positive way. So this, I think that has some good value. And the fact that it's still operating also had a big impact on the economy. Like it or not, TikTok is now embedded into the U.S. economy, which means that the removal of that application would have meant the destruction of many businesses that rely on it for traffic, for advertising, for marketing, and so forth. So it made sense to try to figure out a solution. The question is, will it compromise national security? So quite a few things for them to work out. So does it surprise anybody that the new head of the Department of Government Efficiency may himself be a buyer for the TikTok app? Doesn't surprise me in the least. Does it surprise any of you? And maybe this was the plan all along, folks. Maybe, just maybe. Okay. China is weighing the sale of TikTok US to Musk as a possible option. So Chinese officials are evaluating a potential option that involves Elon Musk acquiring U.S. operations of TikTok if the company fails to fend off a controversial ban on the short video app, according to people familiar with the matter. So who would be shocked that Elon Musk ends up owning U.S. version of TikTok? Who? Show of hands of who's shocked. Wipe that shock look off your face. Right. Somebody said coordinated efforts. I think you're sharp. This is why it's hard to fool you when you get together and you stop letting the fear and you stop letting all that anxiety, right? You stop letting them make you freak out and you get together and you start comparing notes. What happens? We do it every day here. We do it all the time at our table. But what happens, folks? We start calming down. You start seeing through the machination. You start seeing through the manipulation. You start seeing wag the dog. Okay. What happened to, the war with Russia? Wasn't that like number one news item going on? All of a sudden gone? Just no more? All done? We're all done with that? Thought we were invading Lebanon? What happened? Just all gone. Stories just disappeared. Apparently everybody just stopped shooting. Just like that. Imagine that. Things to make you go, Well, this story continues to go on. I'll tell you that for sure. We're still seeing fire ravaged Southern California, bracing for gusty winds. And again, this is a continued heightened risk. And it doesn't matter if it's natural or not. The point is they're warning you they're going to burn more things. So whether it's natural or artificial, more is going to burn. Southern Californians are bracing for gusty winds and heightened risk of wildfires less than 2 weeks after the outbreaks of deadly blazes that killed at least 27. Oh, that number's gone up. And the charged thousands of homes. The National Weather Service has issued a warning of particularly dangerous situation for parts of Los Angeles and Ventura counties from Monday afternoon through Tuesday morning due to low humidity and damaging Santa Ana winds. So if you're in Southern California, you may want to get moving. I don't know why you would want to remain there, but I know that there's a lot of nostalgic connection. I used to live in San Diego. It's a beautiful area, so I can understand why people want to somehow see if it can be salvaged. But boy, the rebuilding of some of these areas, especially if they get burnt out the way that it looks like, it's just going to be such a challenge, an uphill challenge, especially if the insurance companies have bailed. Remember, a year and a half ago, we reported about that. How they were abandoned in California. And we were wondering then, what do they know that we don't know? Now we see, we followed along. And if you go back on Remnant Watch and do a search on insurance companies in California, you probably find a story or two where we're going, why are they canceling policies in California? Remember that, guys? That was a while ago. Some of you might remember. Here's another thing that we keep seeing dropped into the mindset of the people. So pay attention to this. Researchers are warning about the zombie deer thing. Remember, this kind of left the psyche for a while, but now it's coming back, and I'm seeing this more and more. So I'm bringing it up just so you guys are aware, so nobody gets freaked out about this, because this is actually continues to come back into the news cycle every so often, and I'm not sure why it just keeps popping back in, but it does. Researchers are warning that chronic wasting disease, also known as zombie deer disease, could spill over to humans. And again, if you are shooting, killing wild game, most hunters are pretty smart, and if they see the animal is ill, they're not going to consume it. But nevertheless, there are people will be people. A new report from the University of Minnesota detailed gaps in preparedness and response if TWD starts to spread from deer to other animals, including humans. So again, they're speculating on possibilities, instead of what actually is in fact happening on the ground. This is one of the reasons why these articles are so deceptive, because you had to be paying attention to catch that they're talking about the possibility of things, not what's real or what's actually happening. So if you're just a headline watcher, you might think that it's a foregone conclusion that it's everywhere and that the deer are all poisoned. You just might just make that assumption just by looking at a headline, and they know that. They know that most people don't read, don't comprehend, don't take a moment to listen. And here they're just talking about it could be, it could be. Well, show us some examples of it first before you go scaring everyone. And here's another one that they continue to point. And we saw this one coming, and we watched this narrative get built. Remember that? We watched it one after another. This narrative got built one after another. It kept happening. And now we're seeing, of course, the end game, I think, or where they were headed. So it's detected in commercial poultry flock in Georgia. And so they basically shut the entire thing down. It's starting to create legitimacy in some of their actions. When again, folks, some of this is crackpot science. So we have very learned and well-respected scientists on the opposite side of the spectrum, absolutely decrying all of this. So this is not settled by any means, and I'm very grateful that there's plenty of pushback going on where people are starting to wake up. But nevertheless, there are certain things that are dangerous to happen. I mean, if you were to kill an animal that had rabies, well, we all knew better than to do that. And I mean, if you're killing an animal that's got, obvious wasting disease or things like that, you're obviously putting yourself at risk. So, but I spent a lot of time. I spent like 30 years around Minnesota hunters, and they all seem pretty smart about that. So I'm just not worried about a big giant outbreak. Just not something I'm sitting on the edge of my chair worrying about. Just not. Okay. Something that I would be a little bit more concerned about are things like this, because these things are not fake science. They're real. And 17 drone sightings were reported on this big happy day in airports. So the drone sightings are still creating concerns, and they're saying they're going to produce some answers, but so far we're just continuing to get questions, and they kind of disappeared from the news cycle. You guys noticed that the old drones sort of disappeared for a minute. Well, they're back, and we need to know what they are. Officials have reported an unusually high number of drone sightings near Francis Gabreski Airport in Suffolk County in recent weeks. The sightings have taken place in highly sensitive areas, including over runways and restricted airspace. So this problem has not been solved. It continues to be a challenge. I think we've got ourselves a problem. Especially when, didn't we see a story last week where there were some drones seen over some spots, and then they ended up having fires on the West Coast? So definitely some suspicious things going on there. Now, changing gears, a lot going on with the Supreme Court. And this is a big shifteroo from 2015 when we saw the rainbow colors. And now the Supreme Court is going to decide if religious parents can opt their kids out of certain curriculum, right? And so the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a plea for parents to have the ability to opt their children out of the Maryland school district's curriculum. And I tell you something, it's amazing to me how they frame these things. This is a false dichotomy, folks. They're going to decide. They're going to decide this. If religious parents, folks, they don't get to decide this. It's called homeschool. You get to decide. You get to decide if you want your child as a part of it. That's how you decide. You pull your child out. And if that state continues to press it, you pull your child out of that state. You do what you've got to do to protect your child. That's how you make your choice. You don't, there's only so much you're going to do in Babylon. There's only so much fighting you can do in Babylon. And they like to put people in lions' dens. And time to stakes and things like that. So you be careful out there, folks. But don't you worry, you Californians, because right before he left, Biden made sure that you were going to all get $770 as a check because you were impacted by the wildfire. So they do care about you. They're going to make sure you get your $770 to impact you. And I bet you got to pay it back too. Which is, it's truly sad in and of itself. I mean, what an absolute, what a sad ending to a once great nation. So these things are really, really, really nuts. But I do thank the Most High that there is some sanity returning. We do know that the scripture talks about judgment and justice returning to the earth. So continue to pray for that. And I think we're starting to see that. All of a sudden, everybody now knows which bathroom to use. Imagine that. 2 House Dems joined GOP to ban biological males from girls' school sports. And of course, no Democrats voted for the girls' sports bill when it first came up in 2023. And this time, 2 of them did vote alongside Republicans to ban athletes born male from participating in girls' school sports teams. I don't think anybody thought that we would need an actual congressional amendment or a law in order to bring that level of sanity back to the nation, but unfortunately we did. So there's that. And the mental health level of our nation has declined considerably, and we have to continue to be the remedy, folks. So shine your light out there, continue to be an encouragement to people, bring a sound mind thinking. Don't pull yourselves out. Can I just tell you guys something real quick before I go on to the last few stories? One of the things our enemy loves to do is drama bomb you. And what is drama bombing? He wants to bring drama, sometimes their drama, around you such that other people will find you distasteful because of their drama. But it is our task in life. And so as much as we would like to disconnect from all drama, we can't, because we're the remedy. We're the remedy. So we're the ones who calm those waters. We're the ones who bring light into darkness. We're the ones that bring healing when there's tumult. And we're the ones that cast out devils who would otherwise destroy homes. So as much as we would like to avoid the drama of our world, we can't. We are, after all, the remedy. And speaking of remedies, people are starting to figure out the fake from the real. And pharmacia is being exposed for being the fake that it is. And healthcare giants with 166 clinics across the U.S. plan to axe half of their hospitals amid bankruptcy. I thought they were, riding high, curing people's diseases. Well, they stink at that. Third largest cause of death in the United States is medical malpractice, folks. That's a fact. A healthcare giant that operates 16 hospitals across 4 states has filed for bankruptcy, and with plans to offload several of them. And so they're not doing well. This, I believe it is a judgment on what is essentially wicked sorcery. And many who are engaged in it will themselves find themselves on the wrong side of history there, because I think we're going to take some time to recover from the witchcraft and sorcery we've been subjected to as a people for multiple generations. I think it's going to take a while before we really realize the impact that we've all suffered as a result of some of these things. And that is now reflective in some of the studies. People are expecting majority of adults globally believe children would be economically worse off than their parents. So they're not seeing the positive of these various efforts that have gone on for the last 50 years. Adults in 36 countries around the world, including the U.S., hold a bleak view of what the future holds for their children economically, with more than half expecting that kids today will be worse off than their parents amid growing income inequality, according to a new study from the Pew Research Center. Now, the good news is I actually think they're wrong, but I do think that the sentiment is real. And that is something for us to understand and minister to. So, folks, be aware of that. A lot of hurting folks out there. And there are solutions, but it is hard for people to find them. Retooling and retraining when economies change is one of the biggest challenges people face. When we switched from the agricultural to industrial society, a lot of people suffered economically because they didn't make the switch. And each time we went like from analog to a digital society, a lot of people suffered because they were stuck with the yellow pages. Remember that? And they didn't get on digital advertising and digital things quickly enough. A lot of businesses went under still trying to make the yellow pages work. In the same way, here we are in a digital world with digital economy and digital currencies. And whether you like them or not, whether you agree with them or not, they're part of your world now. You're going to have to wake up. So it's important that we put our fears aside and begin to walk forward with courage. Here's some good news. How many of you have been standing on your head wondering when they were going to remove some of these deadly dyes from the foods? Well, some common sense is finally coming in, and U.S. is banning red food dye over possible cancer risks, something we've all known for some time, right? So they're finally doing that. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden administration on Wednesday announced a ban on red dye number 3. Now, frankly, I don't remember that being the primary red dye being used. I seem to remember it being a different red dye. So I don't remember being red dye number 3. I thought it was like number 21 or something. So I don't know if this one even affects. Just people getting all like, yes, they're getting rid of the red dye. It's like, well, is it the right one? I don't even know. So somebody check for us and let us know if that's the real one or if they're just pulling the whole little okey doke on us and a little bait and switch. So we all be quiet about the red dye. But I do think parents, you need to be careful about the foods that you authorize, that you approve of. Never mind what the FDA approves. The FDA is just a recommendation to parents. Parents are the ones that need to approve it. And so be careful what you approve, dads, moms, dads, grandparents, before you give them to your grandchildren, because we've got enemies out there. They want them drugged up or something. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder what's going on. And it's not just, unfortunately, it's not just, the chemical things, and it's not just the television, it's not just the media, it's not just materials that they read, it's not just the internet, it's not just social media, folks. I wish I could say that. I wish it was all outside, but I want to remind everybody that the way in which the adversary works is infiltration. The enemy comes right into the very table where Messiah is sitting, dips his bread right in the bowl of Yahuwah's anointed, without any impurity, without feeling anything, and we'll do it without trouble. And so we also need to have our eyes open to the imposters and liars and deceivers right in our midst. And the public trust in pastors is continuing to decline. So this is something that, unfortunately, when we don't hold people accountable, when we don't force things like Matthew 18 or forcing people to be accountable for their actions, especially if they misbehave in some of these ways, this is the result. So public trust in pastors has dropped to a new low because of a lack of accountability, folks, because instead of being accountable, they just run off and start something else. So according to the Gallup poll, the survey finds that only 30% of Americans rate clergy as the highest honest and ethical, continuing a downward trend. Highly honest and ethical. That should be above reproach. And unfortunately, they are not. A clergy were ranked below auto mechanics, judges, but above bankers and nursing home operators. So there's hope. But unfortunately, this rating may just be good common sense, because frankly, many of them cannot be trusted. And that is unfortunately what we found. I think the profession may have attracted the wrong kinds of people. So there's that. And that's unfortunate, but it is reality. One of the things that is restored in the recovery of the fivefold and the recovery of the Natzarim, the Kodeshim, is also the counsel, the thing that Messiah warned that people would be in danger of, depending upon how they spoke. So the counsel is restored, and these are things that I believe needed to be in order to restore those things that were dying. And here we are. Speaking of absolute degradation of thinking, this is purely demonic. I warn you before I go into the story that it's a very, very demonic story, and it just reflects, again, the continuing degradation of the mental state of the average person, television and the demonic influences there, music and its demonic influences, internet. I don't have to tell you how bad that is. All of this has created a perfect storm of psychotic impulses and inputs that are triggering people in various ways. And here's a perfect example of how psychotic this all can become. A woman has poisoned her baby in order to grow an online following. So if you don't think people will do crazy things for an online following, you are mistaken. If you don't think that they will literally go to any extreme to justify in order to keep their online following, here's a perfect example of the kind of psychotic breaks that can happen. So it's very dangerous. Popularity is a snare, something you have to all be careful about. So this woman, of course, was taken into custody. A 34-year-old Australian woman was charged with torture. Police accused her of administering unauthorized medication to a 1-year-old and posting videos of the child in immense distress and pain so that she could solicit donations and grow her social media following so that she could solicit donations. This is extremely dangerous. But when people don't have a way to pay their bills, you will be shocked at what they will resort to, okay? Police arrested the woman Thursday in Underwood, Eastern Australia, and charged her with 5 counts of administering poison with intent to harm, 3 counts of preparation to commit crimes and dangerous things, and 1 count of torture, making child exploitation material and fraud. The individual charges can carry sentences between 5 and 20 years of prison. And of course, you know, the sad reality is that the social media rewards certain behavior. And without knowing it, they were encouraging this. So without realizing, they were encouraging this woman to do this. And I'm sure many well-meaning people were helping her out and, you know, sending her money, right? And probably, oh my, you poor dear, let me give you $100. Let me give you $50. Oh, you poor darling. And not realizing that she was torturing her child in order to get that sympathy vote. Folks, we need to be very careful with that. We need to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves in this hour. And so please don't take lightly these moments that you got an opportunity. And many times these are cries for help. A lot of folks are right now struggling with mental health issues as the enemy has gone, he's gone full on against everyone. I believe we're seeing probably one of the most all-out type of psychological and spiritual warfare moments in history. So we're seeing a lot of crossing back and forth, counter narratives going back and forth, fighting going back and forth. The best thing for us to do is pull out of that and just continue to be a berakah to the people. Continue to shine your light before men so that they would see your good work and give kavod to your Father in heaven. Well, that's it. I thought I had another story, but I don't. That's the end of it for tonight. So I pray that this broadcast has been a berakah to you, and I pray it's been an encouragement. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for liking and subscribing and for sharing the video through your social media and through your contacts. It's appreciated. Again, we are so thankful for those of you that are part of the house and continue to make these broadcasts possible. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Shalom and good evening.